From practicing a religion to wearing skinny jeans, here are 10 things you shouldn't do in North Korea. For several decades, North Koreans have been taught from an early age to worship the North Korean ruling dynasty. This worship is a fundamental duty of citizenship, and the people are conditioned to feel and practice it from an early age. The deep devotion that the people owe to the Kim dynasty in general, and to Kim Jong-un in particular, is embodied in the form of the 10 principles for establishing a monolithic ideological system. This is a code of conduct that every citizen of North Korea must know by heart, and which is intended to ensure the absolute obedience of the masses. These principles have sacred value and are deeply rooted in the minds of North Koreans. Thinking outside this ideological box can be dangerous. Indeed, as you can imagine, criticizing the regime, for example, is a severely punished crime. Let's take the example of a North Korean journalist. His only mission is to rely the government's propaganda and to serve the interests of the ruling party. After 15 years of work, he receives official honors. The North Korean journalist is obliged to write articles praising the Kim Jong-un regime and condemning the policies of the United States, Japan, and South Korea. If he dares to leave his comfort zone and question the system, then endless trouble begins. If by chance he has committed only a small clumsiness, for example by spelling the name of an important dignitary, he is subjected to ideological re-education within an organization intended for this purpose. On the other hand, if he is suspected of dissent, the police seize him and transport him to prison, where he is tortured until he confesses his crime. After that, a summary conviction takes place and the journalist is sent to the detention camps, where he will probably spend his whole life. In North Korea, Christians cannot exercise their religion in peace. However, the country's constitution, adopted in 1972 and revised many times afterwards, explicitly guarantees citizens freedom of belief. However, the reality is quite different. According to the evangelical NGO Open Doors, since 2002, North Korea has been the country where Christians are most persecuted. Since the establishment of the communist regime in North Korea, the place of Christianity has been greatly reduced. The first is that the regime associates this cult with Western capitalism, which must be fought. The second reason is that Christianity is considered by the state as an erroneous worldview and contrary to communist values. The third reason is that any religion is seen as competition to the cult of the supreme leader. If they wish to worship, Christian must hide. In 2009, Ri Hyung-ok, a North Korean woman of Christian faith, suffered a tragic fate for not being discreet enough. This woman had allowed herself to distribute Bibles, but the very possession of a Bible and any sign of belonging to Christianity is severely repressed by the government. Proselytizing, that is, spreading a doctrine to recruit new followers, is even more cruelly punished. Ri Hyun-ok was therefore sentenced to death and executed in public on June 16, 2009. As bad things happened, her whole family was transferred to a detention camp in the northeast of the country. In this regard, it is very common that the family circle of the convicted person is also interned or executed. Indeed, North Korea believes in the theory of eugenics, that is, the selection of individuals according to predefined genetic criteria. In other words, when a person commits a crime, his relatives could also be criminals. They are therefore all sent to concentration camps. For France, private property is an inviolable and sacred right and constitutes one of the foundations of justice and equity. For other countries, private property is simply non-existent. This is the case in North Korea. If you are North Korean and you bought a house, legally it does not belong to you. However, in reality, it is as if you own it. Indeed, in North Korea, there is no title deed, but there is something similar. It is a residence certificate without expiration date, issued by the municipality. This paper is a kind of proof of moving in. Let's imagine that you have sold your house and you want to buy another one in Pyongyang. The transaction you will make will be in dollars because almost all payments in the real estate business are made in this currency. If you have decided to buy a large house built in the last 20 years, it could cost you more than $80,000. This price could increase if the house is located near commercial areas, near universities, or near train stations. In short, once the transaction is completed, you go with the seller to the local city council. There, in exchange for a small bribe, quality cigars would do, the official will destroy your old documents and give you your new residency certificate. While, as mentioned, you do not legally own your new home, in practice you can use all the rights that come with beneficial ownership. That means you can rearrange your home as you wish, decorate it, control access to it, cultivate the garden as you see fit, and even rent it out. However, you should not forget that your legal rights are very limited and the risk of abusive expropriation is real. In fact, on the website Perspective Mond from the School of Applied Politics of the University of Sherbrooke, you can see the index of property freedom in all countries, including North Korea. As you can imagine, North Korea is at the very bottom of the ranking, along with other countries such as Cuba and the Democratic Republic of Congo. This means that in these countries, private property is non-existent. The state can dispossess you of your property and corruption is prevalent. In 2010, the North Korean national soccer team qualified for the World Cup in South Africa for the first time in 44 years. Against all odds, North Korea, led by coach Kim Jong-un, managed to secure a place among the other Asian countries. Kim Jong-un, who became very popular in the country after this qualification, had the task to prepare his team for the 3 matches of the group stage. Friendly matches were organized in France, and North Korea had to acclimatize to the style of play of the Western opponents. Everything went well. The competition started and North Korea had to face Brazil. They lost with a respectable score of 2-1. It was not a bad result. Encouraged by the performance of their national team, the North Korean authorities had taken a historic decision. Indeed, they decided that the next match against Portugal would be broadcast on local television. Normally, no foreign programs, cultural or sports were broadcast on local channels. Coach Kim Jong-un and his team would be watched by the whole country, but the government soon regretted its decision. North Korea lost to Portugal 7-0, and the broadcast was interrupted after the 4th goal. Kim Jong-un was distraught and his situation would not improve in the 3rd game, as North Korea lost 3-0 to Ivory Coast. Eliminated, the players and the coach had to return to their country, and according to Radio Free Asia, the reception they received was terrible. Guilty of betraying Kim Jong-il's trust by humiliating North Korea worldwide, coach Kim Jong-un was sentenced to hard labor in a mine. According to the same source, the players were summoned to the People's Palace of Culture to be insulted by several hundred people, including sports fans, journalists, and dignitaries. This ban made so much noise that FIFA had opened an investigation. In short, when you are a North Korean sportsman, it is better not to have any major failures on the international scene. The wealth gap is very wide in North Korea. According to information from Seoul, the capital of South Korea, there are about 240,000 people who have more than $50,000. This is the privileged class, the one who can live comfortably, and it is only a very small part of the population. Son Ken-myu, a former hotel manager in Pyongyang, was not part of the social category in the early 2000s. One day he received a $300 tip from a Japanese man to whom he had done a favor. He then had the idea of importing various foreign products that he would sell locally in his hotel thanks to this money. In this way, he made good business. After a while, he managed to earn a considerable amount of money in dollars, and his hotel became very prosperous. Later, his business was so successful that he collected more than $100,000. But in North Korea, one does not acquire such a large sum in such a short time without being worried by the authorities. Son Ken-myu told a South Korean radio station much later, large amounts of foreign currency in private hands are a threat to the authorities, especially when the money is not shared as the state would like. Soon he was wanted, and to avoid a death sentence, he decided to flee to South Korea, leaving behind a fake death certificate. According to him, faking his death was the only way to save him. Today, even his family thinks that he died in a car accident in 2003. Of course, in his new country, he has changed his name, and he categorically refuses to be photographed, for fear that the images will reach his executioners. But Sun Kyen-myu takes revenge on the regime that persecuted him, since in the South Korean radio station where he works, he broadcasts anti-communist pirate messages to North Koreans. In short, one of the things not to do in North Korea is to get too rich in the resale of imported products. This year, several months ago, in North Korea, a repressive announcement issued by the government made a lot of noise. This measure would have been funny if it did not affect the freedom of dress of young North Korean women. As you may know, the dress code for women in North Korea is strictly regulated by the government. Women must wear skirts or face punishment and reprimand. If young women allow themselves to be influenced by foreign culture and decide to adopt a Western style of dress, they become enemies of the nation and are accused of undermining North Korea's cultural identity. Among the clothes and accessories referring to the capitalist lifestyle that the government fights and bans, there are especially tight jeans. Considered obscene by the authorities, skinny jeans symbolize American imperialism and the capitalist system. Therefore, the authorities, under the pretext of safeguarding the social order, forbid the wearing of tight jeans. It is also forbidden for the North Korean population to wear branded clothes, to dye their hair, and even to have a fancy haircut. In this regard, the authorities are particularly intransigent. Indeed, there is a restricted list of regulatory haircuts, and the North Korean citizen must comply with it. This fight against foreign cultural manifestations is of course intended to maintain the people in ideological servitude, and especially the lower classes. It is important to know that the prohibition of dress does not apply entirely to women from powerful families. Indeed, these families represent for the regime a precious political support. Therefore, the daughters of oligarchs are free to dress as they like. Women of modest means did not enjoy this special privilege. They had to wear skirts, and pants were only allowed in the workplace as a professional uniform. To ensure compliance with the law in terms of dress, the regime set up a committee composed of young people, fiercely socialist and called League of Patriotic and Socialist Youth. One of the missions of this official brigade is to monitor the dress code of North Koreans and to eliminate the threat of foreign fashion intrusion. Thus ends our video on things you shouldn't do in North Korea. As usual, don't forget to let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Did you like this video? Then don't forget to put a like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so that you won't miss any of our next publications.